Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday night event. I'm VG Ramos, and I am here as your host for our Progressive Coders, how to actually get folks to volunteer and be a part of whatever it is you're working on, whether that's actual coding or another type of event. To tell you a little bit about Progressive Coders, I know that most of you have been at our events before, but for those of you who haven't, it is an actual grassroots volunteer organization, all volunteer, where you have actual coders coming together to build technology that is for social good. So this can be, right now there's a lot of stuff going on with the political realm, but you can have other types of good going on, whether it's climate change or education types of things that could be coming up in the future. Now, I actually come to Progressive Coders having had the great opportunity to meet Rapi Castillo, working on behalf of the Sanders campaign in New York. So I live in New York City. My family is originally from Puerto Rico, and I grew up as an Army brat. So my dad was a Vietnam-era vet, and long line of them. My mom's dad actually served during 3 conflicts. But what I'm here doing for Progressive Coders is actually a lot more in terms of relationship building with progressive and social organizations. In terms of, the coders a lot of times understand what it is that we're building, what it is we're trying to do, but we need to have that interaction with other organizations to get them to test it out, to actually get them to use what we are developing. So what I am doing is actually reaching out and working with a number of those organizations to actually explain to them how what is being developed can help their situation. So one example I will give is I was actually talking to Next Gen Climate today, their Nevada chapter, about using social crowd reach to actually get their message out locally. We will be having a meeting later on with Demos, which is actually a progressive think tank, to see how we might be able to work with them in the future, actually use some of their content on some of what's being developed. So just to give you a little bit about what my role is, what I'm doing, one of the things that I will ask is that you can write questions either on the Slack channel, the general Slack channel, or here in the chat, but we're really going to address questions at the end. Each person's going to give a presentation about their particular piece, tell you a little bit about what they'll be talking about, and then we will circle back to questions that were asked. Okay? So I'm going to actually pass it on to Ana, who's going to talk to you about social crowd reach.
Sweet. Thanks, Viji. And I'm so happy to be part of this network so far, because it is really, really great that we're continuing to do things, and that all of the energy and the excitement from Coders for Sanders is kind of continuing, and Rapi was such a good catalyst for a lot of this networking that's happening. So I'm super excited to be talking to you all, and thanks for listening in. So I'm Ana. I'm located in Seattle, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the team I'm working with now and our journey and what we're doing and why, and also just getting a little more involved in kind of what ways that volunteering has impacted. Like, we're just going to kind of look at what we've done in the realm of volunteering and how that lessons learned from that. So let me just start my presentation before I keep bumbling on. So I will share my screen. Social Voter Labs is the name of the group that we are now currently known as. So social crowd reach is a tool that we're currently most focused on. And just a little bit about our background. Our team formed from the Connect sort of website. So we all got the Bernie bug, and then we started getting more involved and started volunteering. And a lot of us worked on the Bernie Connect website. And then we went on to work on the Bernie Friend Finder, and we helped with the Feel the Burn events, and we, continue to work on other tools and have probably interacted with some of you in other networks in projects. So there's 6 of us at the moment. We are mostly developers. We all have a good amount of technical sort of skills that we've been using to empower this progressive wave of activity that's been happening. And when we got to the point where we did some of, helped to build some of these tools, we wanted to keep going. And we're thinking about how do we organize ourselves in a way that we can keep going, we can keep pushing forward. So we knew that we wanted to keep empowering volunteers. That was one of the things that became really apparent. But we chose to be an LLC because we really wanted to have a lot of autonomy about what we were doing and how we did it. Also, we wanted to be able to really be responsive to the need of the users and not necessarily be dependent on a specific donation or a specific investor. So we chose to be an LLC because that had the most flexible organizational structure for us. And then we are using sociocracy in how we're run. So we're really utilizing some of the examples that come from the Netherlands and other organizations that have successfully utilized this model. But really, that's just kind of the background of our organization. What I really want to talk to you about is what we learned from both being volunteers and also building tools for volunteers. And really the most important thing we learned as volunteers was that, if you really want to have an impact, you want to have a really personal interaction. So the person that you talk to is going to listen to you more than someone you don't know. And if you talk to someone in person, you're more likely to have an impact than if you talk to them on the phone. And if you have 2 very similar candidates, even just one email can make a really big difference in who somebody votes for. So when we became aware of that, because of doing a lot of research and working in the campaign world for a while as volunteers and thinking about these things, we realized that there's a little bit of a life cycle in how volunteering works. You become interested in something, maybe you read an article, and then maybe you tweet about it if you really start believing strongly in it. At some point you might join a group and look at the conversations that are happening, maybe get on Reddit. And then if we create tools that really lower the kind of difficulty of becoming engaged and let people kind of slowly become more involved as they're ready, what we are doing is we're kind of, as a whole, as a progressive group, we're making it as easy as possible to have the most meaningful interactions. So if a volunteer or a person engaged gets to a point where they're actually able to interact with the group of volunteers, building the Connect website, which was a volunteer-run website, it was really, really important to have a really clear goal and visibility into that goal. And then to have that transparency so that people that join your team can really understand what you're doing and how they can be involved and take ownership so that they can stay engaged. So that's when we thought, okay, well, we really do need to mobilize volunteers. That's a huge, huge place that has so much potential. And there aren't a whole lot of tools out there. And some of the tools that get built for campaigns, what happens is the campaign will use the tool, but then it'll die with the campaign. Either people will lose interest because that candidate is no longer a interesting topic, or maybe the tools won't be available to others because that campaign doesn't want their potential competitor or somebody they don't like to get a hold of those tools, or maybe they just run out of money, so there isn't a way to sustain them. So we realized quickly that we really need to be kind of a separate thing that is really just focusing on the actual issues and the actual volunteers who are going to be doing a lot of work outside of even the election cycle, while still enabling them to participate within the political process as well. So a lot of the technology that kind of lowers the cost of this kind of thing is not super well understood, and a lot of times, you know, the traditional campaign process doesn't necessarily fully think about the full extent that social media can be utilized. And we really wanted to empower people beyond just TV and beyond just simple Twitter ads. We wanted to let people kind of talk to the people they knew and more easily and kind of collaborate on a given issue. So, so we built this tool, and it's still in alpha, but the goal is to not to be a social network, but to actually utilize existing social networks so that people can find like-minded people more easily. So, you know, there's like a way to find friends you like on Facebook, or maybe and talk to them about something, and encourage other people to talk to their friends about something. You know, the upcoming tools are things like enabling more like Twitter functionality, where you can find people based on their kind of hashtags or something like that. So there's a certain amount of emphasis on social media. But then when we were doing this for Bernie in the FaceBanking world, we found that very quickly we also needed to have a team of people working together, because there's a lot of work that goes into social media outreach, as many of you know. So you might need to collaborate. How do you create those images that you post online? How do you make those images meaningful? How do you get people's attention? How do you make a concerted effort to all be talking about the same thing at the same time to get the most impact? So there's a little bit of effort within the group that you need to kind of align yourself. And then there's a lot of need for having visibility into what other people are also doing. So having an easy way to see what other like-minded groups are doing is another part of how we're trying to design this platform, so that people can really connect to each other very quickly, no matter where they are in the country or in the world. So you can check out our tool. It's on live, but it's in alpha, and we are looking to build further features onto what we have now. So it's www.socialcrowdreach.com. And we have a plan to have improvements to kind of the Facebook tools and the chat functionality, and implement some of the things that we had before for Bernie, like the Facebook event invitation tools and Twitter tools. But we also really, really want to hear what the current kind of volunteer community and also activist community would find useful, you know, because ultimately we want to be responsive to the needs of the user base. If you have any interest in this and you are like, yeah, that'd be cool, but I really need this feature, or like, you know, what about this thing? Have you thought about that? We'd love to hear from you. You can actually even go on the site and then join our campaign and talk to us in the chat, or you can email us, or you can find us on Progressive Coders on Slack. I'm actually Turtle the Turtle, if you see me there. And then the other ways that we're like looking to collaborate with people is, you know, technology is only as powerful as the community that is a part of it. So ultimately, you know, we want people to share best practices and lessons learned and help each other learn how to mobilize, and learn how to like all row in the same direction from each other. So, you know, we want to have as much of that insight available in the actual platform. So if you're somebody who's like really passionate about a cause, you can just go on there and get going really quickly, because you have access to this network of people. And, you know, if there isn't a campaign that's already doing that, you can start your own, and you can utilize some of these best practices to really be effective. Other ways that we want you to be involved with us is if you have a tool, or you're building a tool and you're like, I really want as many volunteers and activists as possible to have access to this. We're happy to integrate. We're always looking for ways to collaborate, and we love pushing this whole effort forward by being really inclusive and really working together as much as possible. And then finally, if you are a coder and you really want to help us, we're also looking for new team members. So please feel free to join us. And I'm actually going to have Ollie talk a little bit about kind of the technology really quick to give you a sense of what we're doing and if that interests you as a coder.
Hey, everybody. My name is Ollie. I'm a front-end developer, or trying to be a full-stack developer to some extent. I'm originally from Bahrain, living in New York right now, kind of lived all over the place. My background is actually in advertising. I'm an art director by training, and kind of developed, kind of just progressed into developing and doing more front-end stuff. Really not just going through our own technology stack, I would kind of give you an insight into how we were designing or making these decisions. So leading it volunteer-driven effort, or if it's more so a corporate setup like ours where it's more horizontal, you need to have people that you need to have your project flexible to kind of enable people to contribute in the best way possible. So the project has to be modular. The feature design has to kind of account for the fact that maybe people can't spend a lot of time on each individual feature. Each feature has to be manageable in a sense. You have to think about the flexibility of your stack overall. You have to think about the architecture in a sense. And then something that we learned kind of the hard way is that you have to test. You have to have automated tests. Don't leave that to the last step. Don't make that the last thing. It's really, really essential, especially when you have a lot of people contributing to the project. You don't want things kind of going through and breaking. So to that, our stack kind of starts with React, and we use Node and Express for a lot of our services in the backend. But really, our architecture is kind of microservices oriented. We have multiple services that talk to each other just to kind of allow autonomy for the developers to develop their own services at their own pace, in their own stack. So we have a Rails side to things, and then we have a Node side to things. But the important part is that you kind of establish best practices early on. So we're using kind of the most modular way you can build things. So React with ES6 components, and then we're using Atoms and Sass for the general styles, where you can kind of configure everything just through variables going through. And then the automation deployment is definitely important. That database kind of architecture, that's mostly kind of preference-based. But in the approach, you really have to kind of engage people with your soft skills. You have to have a way to kind of learn how to motivate and work with people. So some people respond to comments in the code where, hey, can you help me here? Some people would rather you write them a really detailed bug or ticket report, these kind of things. So you kind of have to be conscious of your other team members as you're working in a structure like this. So I'm going to hand it back to Rapi, and thank you for the opportunity, guys. I really appreciate it.
So actually, I'm going to take it because we're going to actually be handing it off to Dan, and he's going to be speaking to us specifically about volunteering.
Hey there, everybody. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. But, my name's Dan Nicodemo. I am a longtime fan of politics, you could say. Most recently, I've been working with some grassroots organizations in Arkansas for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Big Bernie fan, been following Bernie since about 2009. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about targeted volunteering and organizing smart. So some of what I say may come off as kind of no duh to some of us who have actually done a lot of volunteering and organizing before, but just going to reiterate some things that I guess every volunteer should know, and more importantly, every volunteer organizer should know about how to make the most impact with your time and energy. I'm going to go ahead and share my little presentation here with everybody. Give me just a moment. I went a little fancy with mine too, so bear with me. So part of what I'm going to talk about, of course, is the current climate that we're in politically. Most of what I'm going to touch on really has to do more with volunteering for political campaigns and in the political sphere. And so the first thing we're going to talk a little bit about is just the climate of where we are, and that is we're in a really volatile and tumultuous time in terms of politics. There's a lot of misinformation out there, not only due to the volatility of data on the internet, but also a lack of integrity in the media, which I think those of us who have really been following closely in the current primaries, I think we'll all agree that there's a lot of misinformation coming out of the media. There's also a lot of anonymous voices out there adding to the cognitive dissonance. You know, just being on social media, being on the internet at all, I'm sure you have all encountered these people who like to spew pseudoscience and scream at you and call you terrible names, and things like that are actively dissuading folks from paying attention and being a part of the process. This is despite the fact that we are in this incredibly technology-connected world with access to all this information. It's kind of a double-edged sword. More and more, we're also seeing political campaigns are adopting technology, following data-driven principles when it comes to outreach and organizing. That is, of course, most obvious in terms of canvassing and using voter files to actually reach out to people, phone banking, etc. The problem with that is that political campaigns are still largely controlled by the old school, the establishment folks who like their systems and like the old way of doing things because there's all kinds of little rules built in that benefit them. So you know you're dealing with all of these awesome technological tools that really can't be used because, well, people just don't want them to get used. So we're stuck with all of these old models of behavior and action that are not producing the kind of results that they should. And I think this is a number that I like to talk about a lot, and that's the 9%. That is the amount of our population that actually picked Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to be the two main party candidates. 9% of our population has determined the course of the rest of our country. So that's kind of where we are right now. And the problem is voter turnout has been on the decline worldwide, not just in America, over the past 40 years. There are a few, I'm going to post this presentation up into our Slack channel as well, because there are going to be, these links are all clickable and stuff, and so I've sourced a lot of this, and I'll fill in some stuff that's missing. But voter turnout has been on the decline worldwide, especially in America, but really across all of the major democracies. Despite leaps and bounds of technology, the most effective way of reaching people is through canvassing. There's actually a really excellent paper by Ryan Enos and Eaton Hirsch that's coming out in the American Political Science Review that they actually did a very good empirical study on the effects of canvassing over several election cycles. It's an interesting read. You can actually read the whole thing online right now. And they pretty much prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that canvassing is still the most effective way to reach people. However, because of the way that establishments, politicians, and operatives like to run their campaigns, what you end up getting is what we're going to call a voter-volunteer mismatch. I don't want to really talk too much about the last line of this, but nobody in the establishment really cares that the volunteer system right now doesn't work because they're getting tons of money in campaign contributions to put ads. So you see with major campaigns like the Clinton campaign, you know, these volunteer groups really don't get much direction from the top. And that actually is particularly true in the Sanders campaign as well, although that was, of course, a little more deliberate, the whole idea being grassroots outreach. So the problem then, recapping, is that we are getting a mismatch between voter and volunteers. And what I mean by that, let me expound on that a little bit, and more importantly, the solution to that is targeted data-driven person-to-person volunteer organizing. And what that really means at the end of the day for all of us is, well, basically you need to put the right people in front of the right people. Person-to-person, first of all, will always be the best way to get a message, specifically a political message, out. There is an energy between people. There's so much research to just prove that person-to-person interaction is the best way to get responses from people. Folks act a certain way when you're actually standing in front of them. That they're more engaged. They can't just kind of tune you out like they can with a TV. There's a surprising amount of research to show this. Meeting someone face to face also kind of removes any artificial barriers of communication. Like you can't lose signal, you can't have a typo, you can't mislink something. It's just you and the other person communicating with your mouths. Another benefit to that, of course, it's cheaper. I mean, what's cheaper than walking next door and talking to your neighbor? Beyond that, you get all kinds of intrinsic value from the standpoint of a campaign when you think about members of the community seeing other members of the community out doing things. At the very least, they'll ask questions. And at the end of the day, campaigns are about people. It is the whole purpose of politics is people helping people and building something that is made of people. Folks are going to be more willing to trust folks that they perceive as living members of their community rather than just some voice on a phone. I think we can all probably agree on that. So moving a little further forward, when I say targeted, what that means is not just, hey, go knock on a bunch of doors and spread the message. I'd have to say that Bernie's campaign is kind of guilty of this. We had a lot of super, super excited, enthusiastic volunteers willing to walk across the country to spread the message of Bernie, and while that's all well and good, there are some downsides to that. Targeted means picking a group and going after them. You have to think about it a lot of the same ways a marketing company looks at their advertisement campaigns. You have a message. That message is going to resonate with a certain group of people more than another certain group of people. To maximize that message's impact, you should expend your hours and your work energy targeting the group that is most likely to resonate with your message. It doesn't seem like a big, logical leap for those of us that have worked with data before, but for folks who are just putting themselves out there to your community or maybe just testing the waters of organization, this seems to be something a lot of people are missing. This isn't just good advice. This is stuff that is actively not being done. This was rampant in Georgia when I actually moved here from Arkansas. A lot of the grassroots organizations here were just like, you group of people, here's a script, go to this neighborhood. And there was very little use of available data technology to kind of like locate folks who would actually understand and appreciate the message. Data-driven, I of course was talking about targeted data-driven research. Specifically for political campaigns, you have access to an unbelievable amount of data on people. You have their voting habits out in front of you. You have the political party that they claim to be affiliated with. You have their birth date. You have their work history, maybe, depending on which campaigns you're working for. Some campaigns have more money than others. But there is a lot of data out there, and working even in casual capacities with some of these groups, it astounded me the amount of data that was being ignored or just not being used at all. A lot of times it felt like having these big voter sheets was just kind of like a bragging right for some of these organizations. Like, oh, well, yeah, my organization team, we've got we bought $50,000 worth of, internet data to use in our local area. Meanwhile, that data wasn't actually being used for anything except the message. There would still just be groups of volunteers going off into the world with, wandering around in places where the people might not really want them there. A perfect example of this, we had these group of girls from New York who came to Arkansas to help us canvass. Really great, really smart, very well versed in Bernie, and all very, very well spoken and passionate, and very thick New York accents. And they started rural areas in northwest Arkansas with people who were descended from mountain clans. And then all of a sudden these Yankees knock on their door telling them that they should let taxes go up so that we can afford to buy new playground equipment. And these are folks who, meanwhile, are struggling to put food on their families' tables and keep their family farms operating. The data was there for the canvassing director to know that the neighborhood he was sending these people into was full of blue-collar, working-class, traditional, I know y'all can't see my air quotes right now, but traditional Arkansas families. And seeing a well-dressed Yankee with a thick accent at their door trying to tell them about socialism, just triggered these folks, and we got the first death threat I ever received was from someone saying if we sent any of those Yankee bad words to their house again, they'd show up with guns. So that brings us to kind of the why we want to use targeted data-driven research, and that is shoot the messenger syndrome. Something that for some reason mainstream political campaigns have not figured out is that folks will shoot the messenger. If the person giving your message is somebody that's going to immediately incite revolt or disgust for any reason in the person you're talking to, that's it. That message is done. It's gone. And this paper by Enos and Hirsch kind of points to that. It's the mismatch between voters and the volunteers reaching out to them hurts more than it helps because of shoot the messenger syndrome. It's really, really crucial as we all move forward into this brand new frontier of grassroots organizer. Some of us are going to become leaders in our communities. It is important for you to not only tailor your message to the people in your community, but the messengers. You know, while it's great to have this huge, vast resource of volunteers, which Bernie Sanders did, the Sanders campaign had this great network of volunteers, the problem was that they were largely all part of the same demographic. And while that wasn't entirely true, obviously, especially near the end of the campaign, it became a much more diverse group of people actually out in the field. But early on, that actually tended to be a hindrance and fed the media narrative of Bernie Sanders suffering among minority groups. And it wasn't really that he was suffering there, it was that the message wasn't getting through because the right messengers weren't delivering it. And this is obviously almost out of the realm of what a common volunteer should worry about, which is why I say put emphasis on the organizers. You know, it's up to you to utilize your resources appropriately. That being said, as a volunteer, there's a lot you can do to be a good volunteer. And even in the cases where you're mismanaged and put in a place where you shouldn't be necessarily, there are ways that you can maximize your impact. To begin, if you're just interested in starting off as a volunteer in the political spectrum, college, young and Democrats and Republicans meetings, absolutely the best place to go. You're going to be in rooms full of young and old people who are really passionate about politics, and a lot of times local politics. That's actually where I got my start, I guess semi-professionally in politics, was at the Young Democrats of Arkansas meetings. Social media, obviously, I really doubt anybody that's listening right now is not aware of social media and the power it has and power it gives us to locate candidates, people, things that are important to us. So obviously, as a volunteer, you can use social media to find a lot of opportunities to volunteer. Google everything. That's kind of just all-around good advice, though. Just Google everything. If there's something on your mind, Google it. I don't understand why more people don't just literally type their questions into Google. It's really baffling. Using tools like Tumblr and Reddit to find people and causes worth supporting. I mean, the Sanders for President Reddit, I mean, those of you who lurked it and worked on it, I mean, they were an incredible resource for the campaign. You know, everybody from the top to the bottom of the campaign would go there from time to time. You know, we got our news from there sometimes before we got it from mainstream media. So, and another place to begin, obviously, talk to literally everyone. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I want to try to scooch it forward a little quicker here. Being a smart volunteer, it's one thing to organize and create a really good organization and put people in the right place. But as a volunteer, you need to be smart and you need to be useful. The best way to do that is to talk to everyone. You don't even need to really be a formal volunteer to do this. Just talk to everyone. This has always been my #1 source of information about a community. It is always my go-to when I'm trying to learn the ins and outs of a particular demographic, because I go and talk to those people. Just if I'm standing in line, walking down the street, you know, you should, if you're in a cause that you believe in and it's something that you think you are actively working towards, you should be talking about it all the time to anyone who will listen. You never know what how your words can affect people. You never know how a sentence you say could change somebody's life. You may put a thought into somebody's head that's never been there before and ends up consuming them, and before you know it, you've created another activist like yourself. So always talk to people. The most useful thing you can do as a volunteer is spread information. So do it. Talk to anyone. But don't just spread stupid information or wrong information. Be knowledgeable, and not just about your own stuff. Just as important as it is to stay up on Bernie's tweets and read articles on the Daily Kos and Alternet, go to Breitbart once in a while. Go to Fox News once in a while. See what your opponents are saying so that you're better prepared for it. One of the worst things that can happen to a volunteer is they react to something that the other side says in a public manner because they frankly weren't prepared for it. You should be prepared for everything. So be knowledgeable about both sides of where you are. Kind of seems like a no-brainer, but again, you'd be surprised how many people are just completely ignorant to what the other side thinks about these issues. And while we as progressives know that we're absolutely 100% right, it's still useful for us to go to the wrong people and kind of try to see where they're coming from. That being said, have a thick skin. People are going to be mean to you no matter who you support or what you support. When you put yourself out there, there's going to be people that resent you for it. So be prepared. Have a thick skin. Be able to deal with insults and people spitting at you and throwing rocks at you. Just remember you're on the right side of history. As long as you feel confident that you are, then be that way. Deal with people's insults. Deal with their ridicule. If you're knowledgeable, you'll be able to defeat them every time. Be ready to sacrifice. A good volunteer knows what it means to actually volunteer. You need to not only be willing to give up your time. In some cases, you may be giving up your space or your money or who knows, your skills, anything. Be ready. If you're really serious about a cause, be ready to sacrifice a lot for it. Things don't get done when people just half-ass it. Things get done when people give everything. Staying informed, obviously, number one thing a good volunteer can do is just always be informed of everything as much as you can. Consume as much information as you can. Once you found a place that gives you reliable information, go to it always. Obviously, always bring donuts if you can as well. Always a good idea. But yeah, that about sums it up. I had a lot more. This is just because I can't have a completely serious presentation or I'll get fired from life. But I'm sure there's more, and I'll be available in Slack to talk more about this too. But the number one thing is just, be deliberate. Choose to make yourself visible. Choose to be somebody who is a leader. Don't just sit back and be quiet and nod your head and go where they tell you to go. We have access as smart, technologically inclined people. We have access to a wealth of information that no other generations have ever had access to. And a lot of it is not getting used by the people who are supposed to be in charge of us right now. And, we can't wait for them. Folks, the reality of our situation right now is our entire species is facing extinction. That is fact. That is happening right now. We cannot just sit back and wait for somebody to come along and solve our fucking problems for us. It isn't going to happen. So all of you, if you feel that fire in you and you feel like, okay, something has to happen, you got to do it yourself. And there's an easy way to do that. Talk to everyone all the time. You don't even have to say much. You don't have huge debates and start fights with people like I do literally every day because I'm super confrontational. But I know for a fact I have swayed hundreds of people to at least get involved. They may not end up voting the way that I want them to vote, but I've seen people who I know have never voted before lining up to vote. And it's only because I talked to them, said a few words to them. So don't be afraid to speak up. Just make sure before you do, you know at least a little bit about what you're talking about. Otherwise, people like me are going to be there to ridicule the living crap out of you. So thank you, everybody. I hope this was helpful to some people. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Castillo here and go meet with some folks from the Carter Center. So good luck, good night. And I have no idea how to give this to you, so I'm just going to do that.
No, I got it, man.
Cool.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, I'm so pumped because of your speech. And I love everything that you said, and thank you so much for presenting that. I'm Rapi. I'm with Progressive Coders Network, and I'm originally from the Philippines. I'm an immigrant from the Philippines, and I live now in New York City with VJ, and yeah, we're in the same neighborhood. So I guess this is going to be much more like a stream of thought type of thing, because this really came about the idea that people have been approaching me many times about their idea and how they need a bunch of coders to work on this idea. And I was at the back of my mind, I think that these ideas are awesome, but it's just not how things work. It's not how coders, like the volunteer coders, are. And I feel that being there in the thick of things has given me a much of the perspective needed to present this presentation to you, and I would love to share my insights about it. So let me just share it now. There you go. Right, so you see? Okay. Right, so my presentation is called Volunteer Coders Are Not Your Interns. And it's something that is very, very important for me to share, because I've seen so much in the past 10 months, past 12 months during Bernie's campaign, that I've seen a bunch of coders changing the way that politics work. And I really felt like sharing this is so important, because first, a lot of people have been approaching me, like saying, many people have been saying that I need 5 coders to help me with this idea that will change politics as we know it. And they just they want me to give them these coders, you know, without any idea of like, are they working for free? Are they going to be paid? But they just want their idea to be realized. And I felt that this is something that is so misunderstood about volunteer coders, because what we're doing is essentially free labor. And what we're doing is something that we're doing on our free time after our usual work. And some people don't necessarily get it, but some people understand it. But others get really angry and say, why is no one joining my project? Do we still want a revolution? And at the back of my mind, yeah, of course, we really want to push for these changes that Bernie has started. We really want to push for changes for positive change in our society. And during that we've been working with Bernie, we've seen so many applications being created, and 84 to be exact. And I feel that there is this disconnect between people who look for coders, wanting them to realize their project for them, and these hundreds of volunteers who have created 84 applications, who essentially has changed the course of this election. Like, no one thought that Bernie was going to be as competitive as he is now. And I feel that there is much to be said about the coders behind it. And that is why essentially we've started this organization in the first place. And that is why so much impact was created by these applications, that the idea that no one wants a revolution or no one wants positive change, on the other hand, is so foreign to me. Because just to give you an example, a 14-year-old kid, I wouldn't say his name, but if you want to raise your hand in Slack, you feel free. But a 14-year-old kid approached me at Coders for Sanders, and he asked me, hey, I need help. Like, how can I get coder support? And I just told him about how we would usually go about things, and he cleared out the problem statement, he cleared out his goal, he was very passionate, and people resonated with the problem, and he was able to raise $8,000 for Bernie, and he was able to attract 4 volunteer coders. And I was thinking, like, if someone as passionate as him can do it, like, I think that maybe everyone can be able to do it. And maybe what is it that separates people who have been able to change the course of election from people who are struggling to get coders on board, right? So there's this disconnect. And I've interviewed, because of this question, I've interviewed 20, 30 individuals, both from project managers, coders, volunteer leaders, and I asked them what made them a success, or like what triggered this idea in them, or like what pushed them to create such an application with zero profit, but with maximum impact to the movement. And through that, I was able to see some differences between the people who are struggling to get coders and the people who are able to push the limits in the movement. So I guess so there are at least three things that I wanted to discuss, like three major things that were different between the two. First is the coders who were able to push for positive change in the movement. Their goal is to enrich the community, and I could not underscore how important looking for a community is, and I could not underscore how important Sanders for President was in the whole Coders for Sanders movement. Like, I think that this movement, this community, was so important throughout the months that came along in Bernie Sanders, that they were able to inspire, they were able to engage and provide information and just support, overall support for the volunteer coders. And what does that mean? Because when your goal is to enrich a community, when your goal is to focus on a community, you get to see stress points. You get to see the issues that the community is facing. And immersing yourself in a community really shows you like how dedicated you are to it, and at the same time how frictions are being made. And one of the things that are very particular or very distinct with coders is that we are problem solvers, and we love solving problems. And when we see a problem, or when we are exposed to a problem, we try as much as possible to look for solutions for it. And having a community, having the community and having the idea that we are serving a community is so important in that it was able to pinpoint the issues, pinpoint the things that need to be improved, and with the skills that the coders have, we were able to provide these solutions. And because of the community being a support for us, we were able to have a clear sense of what the problem is. And another thing that was similar to all of these applications or programmers or projects that were quote unquote success, was that there was a clear problem to solve for them. And as you can see, like for the examples that we were able to provide here, like Vote for Bernie, FeelTheBurn.org, and Bernie Map, and Friend Finder, and the Bernie BNB, they have a specific problem in mind. And having that one singular problem to focus on is very instrumental in terms of first rallying people to your cause, or providing a sense of urgency to your cause. And especially that we are all like rallying behind Bernie, and time is of the essence. Having that problem tied to the time was very important in terms of grabbing coders and getting their attention and enabling them to provide solutions for it. And having that kind of dynamic is very much powerful in empowering and in mobilizing these coders. And for those who aren't coders, for those who had an idea, or who had very much a problem in mind, but they didn't have any idea how to solve it because they're not a coder, they would think that at first they are project managers, but through our conversations and through our interviews, they turned out less of a project manager and more of a volunteer coordinator. And what that means is that for a project manager, you would have to have like targets and goals involved, and like different ticks that you have to check out of a task list or whatever. But being in a team or being in a group of people who are just trying to change something into a positive, who are trying to create a good product for an amazing candidate, right? it became clear to these project managers that they're more of a volunteer coordinator, wherein they would be the ones constantly listening to the coders. They're the ones who are constantly trying to align their goals with the goals of the coder. So there's this different dynamic that I've seen with volunteer coordinators and with an actual professional project manager, wherein it's more about aligning your goals and aligning their goals, and through that they're able to achieve an application, to finish an application, and to see it into completion. And once those applications are complete, and once those applications are ready for prime time, you just go back to your community and you provide a solution to the community, and the community enriches it through testing. The Bernie Sanders map was tested because of Sanders for president. It was spread out because of Sanders for president. We marketed it, and it gained so much traction because of the subreddit. And I don't think that it could have been what it is right now, or anyone, or any application, if it weren't for the community. So it all goes back to that sense that we have to improve our community. So it all boils down to, first, what is your community? Where is your community? And what is the problem faced by your community? And how can you provide a positive impact to that community? And essentially, that's about it. That is the essence of how to get coders rally behind you. Just to give you an example. For us here in Progressive Coders, we are a community of coders wanting progressive change. We want to provide assistance to campaigns so that they will not rely on big money and instead rely on people in order for their names or for their purpose or for their campaigns to gain traction. So we are more on the grassroots level. And from my conversations with different people, we have seen problems within our community, and that is that we feel that for newcomers, we don't know what projects we can plug into. So because we are so inclined, or we are so in sync with our community, we see that, okay, there's an issue with newcomers, we don't really know how to plug them into projects, or how can we know the skills of these newcomers? So we already have a problem in hand, and we are really aware of it. And for project leaders, we need to provide a way to make them sustainable, or to continually provide the assistance that coders can give. So there is this weird connection between the problems of the newcomers and the project leaders, wherein we could have this single-minded solution for it. And I feel lucky, and I'm really lucky to have codecore.org in our community, because what they've provided is essentially a solution for us to look for new volunteers, a solution for project leaders to be empowered, because we have volunteers funneling into them, because they're matching their skills with the skills needed for that project. So CodeCore has provided so much opportunities for us to realize like the full impact or full potential of our projects by connecting us with coders. And not only that, not only will they pair us with a coder with a project, but they're also providing a platform to fundraise. So it covers the whole sustainability issue that Progressive Coders has, because right now what we see is that we're in it for the long haul. Like, we're in it for 2017, we're in it for 2018. This is going to be a longer process, and the most important thing that we have to consider is sustainability. And I feel, and we feel from all my conversations with people, that CodeCore allows that kind of system to thrive, allows that kind of sustainability to be in our minds, to be apparent, because we're always welcoming new people, new talent to come in and contribute. the good thing about this is that it's almost done. And I feel that I guess this is the point in my talk that I would ask you guys to help us out in terms of completing Code Core. I really feel strongly about this, and as an example, I feel like we could rally behind Code Core as a community and help them complete finally their application so that they could help us. And Code Core is a company that is for social good, and they're registered as such. And if you are interested in helping out, like slack.codecore.org to register for their for their Slack. They have their own Slack channel here in our ProgCode channel, which is code-core, and you can always reach out to Josh Smith. So yeah, that's about it for me. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Awesome, Rapi. So that covers our 3 topics for today. I know that Dan had to go, but I just wanted to come back and highlight a couple of the pieces that we've known, and then we'll hit some questions, or a couple of the pieces that we got to hear tonight, and then we'll hit some questions. So one of the key themes that it keeps coming through is, as an example, like Anna said, tech is only as powerful as the community involved in using it. And Rapi just came back around to that in terms of us actually communities are. And I want to put out the point here, and I think it was something that Dan touched on as well, is that we may not belong to just one community. So the Progressive Coders Network is one community, but there are a lot of other communities that we each belong to that we can actually enrich and help support along with what we're doing with it at Progressive Coders Network. The other thing that I think that that comes around with this as well is choosing to make ourselves visible. And that was something that Dan touched on, but it can actually come about in a number of different ways, whether it's leading a project or actually just sharing it. So those are some of the highlights. Okay, we have one question. Are there known examples of if and how these tools were used to our disadvantage by the candidate or their volunteers? So I'm thinking we're talking about the tools that
the grassroots
tools that were developed for Bernie's campaign.
I would frame it another way.
Okay.
I feel that so the grassroots tools that we're supporting, and what was apparent with Bernie was that it was constantly empowering people, right? Finding ways for people to participate. And in my mind, regardless if it was...
I think that's a positive, but in terms of the negative, I think one of the things that comes through in terms of when you think about other candidates trying to use some of the newer, for example, social media tools, is that I think we all got to experience or see where instead of actually targeting specific people there were people who were out there using it for misinformation, as got mentioned. So there are cases where you can see disadvantages, but and it's important for us to know about those, because one of the reasons that something like source crowd reach works is that it's one person who knows another person talking to them about something that they have either researched or found information about from a source that they trust. And it's that trust factor that I think really is important, because when you have other people just posting something up and they don't know the source, then that's where you get the disadvantages. I think Anna wanted to maybe speak to that.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I was actually kind of expecting that question to come up. So we did see a lot of the FaceBanking tools getting picked up by Hillary Clinton at the time when Bernie was running against her. But a couple of things that were interesting is they weren't as effective because the kind of grassroots mobilization around them wasn't there. So a lot of these tools, in particular, that social crowd reach is utilizing the existing networks. So it's not really easy to just take the toll. You have to have the support to actually have an effect. But then like the other issue is kind of like, well, what about having, you know, a campaign or somebody on there that you don't agree with, or how do you like filter that out? And we thought about this a lot, and I guess like the conclusion I'm coming to lately is, you know, we always have some way to mobilize on issues. So even if somebody's supporting Trump, who I personally don't support, oftentimes they'll actually have things in common, right? So like a lot of the stances that they might support from like TPP, or like, you know, maybe some of the economic policies, I can usually understand where they're coming from, and I can usually agree with some of the points that they make. So I think like having also issue-based campaigns and not just political campaigns is really valuable. So like one of the things I'm hoping that happens in social crowd-reach is that, you know, you have a campaign like ending the unnecessary, I don't know, gun violence, or maybe like something even less controversial like more pay time off or something like that. You know, what I would like to see happen is people breaking out of these political polarized ways of thinking about the world and really like getting on board with each other on the issues. And then so even if we do have maybe a couple of campaigns on there that we don't necessarily like personally, right? Like those people are still valuable, and we still want to have the ability to appeal to them, and then maybe they will join other things that are actually something we could all agree on. So I guess that's what I would say to that.
Yeah, on my end, I would have to say that as I feel that it's less of a the opponent using the application, and more of that the people are empowered to use these to express themselves. And if it's the people's mandate to side with the Republican or the conservative or the liberal or whatever, the fact that they are empowered to participate, and the fact that there's these tools that allows for this collective participation is essentially like my goal. That feels really powerful to me. So
well, the other thing is having people actually conversing or sharing where their perception is coming from can actually serve to bringing people together. Because one of the points about knowing where the opposition sits is first you have to be able to listen to them. So having them utilizing some of the same tools so that you have the opportunity to address some of those points and find the common ground, like Ana was saying, to come to solutions that actually help the community as a whole can actually be really beneficial.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think that was the only question that we had received. We'll take a beat here and just see if anybody else has a direct one. Otherwise, questions can definitely be posted to the general Slack.
On issues. So even if somebody's
Okay, I guess there's none.
Yeah. Seems to have been very clear presentations. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thanks,
guys.
Ali.
Thank you.